and she is going to be here at 1 to talk with you more about London. So anyway, are we good? Do you want to do the little intro bio, Max? Here you go.
How do I make this advance while I'm talking? Do I just do it from back here?
I think so. Right. Yeah.
One other announcement that Kate didn't mention.
Sorry.
Her fault. We've been doing call to draw again, and I don't know. It doesn't look like anybody's doing it.
What is call to draw?
Call to draw. Well, I was gonna. Call to draw is a weekly illustration. Oh man, what is it? Okay, so like a challenge. Yeah, there we go. Every week we'll post a theme, and all you have to do is draw something and post it to your Instagram, and then hashtag call to draw. And people, like if we get people to do it, you'll get an honorable mention at Show and Tell that week. So check Twitter and Instagram on Monday for the theme. This week was your favorite snack food. So there's still time. You can still do it. You won't get honorable mention unless you post it in the next 2 seconds, and I get on my phone. So you'll have to wait till next week, but you should still do it anyway. So that's that. And then now I'm going to read this intro. So over the past 20 years, Dan has collaborated with everyone from indie bands to major corporations. His clients range from the Arctic Monkeys to Nickelodeon. He draws from a broad swath of influences and has published several children's books as well as a monograph of his work entitled One Thing Leads to Another. So everyone, a big round of applause for Dan Stiles.
Hey everyone, sorry I am like 10 minutes late. I swear I just ran like a 6-minute mile. It was awesome. With a backpack in boots. So hi, I'm Dan, and I'm just gonna, usually I'm standing right there and I have a dance number, but I have to hold this, push these, so I'm gonna just be back here. I make things. These are some of the things I make. I'm probably best known for doing concert posters like the Decemberists in the upper left there. But I also do a lot of other stuff, children's books, book jackets, art prints, skateboard decks, packaging. I do children's fabric. I have a couple different children's fabric lines. That thing on the right is a full-size arcade game unit that I did with Google. So I do an awful lot of stuff. And so I think I'm going to back up to the beginning for a second here, and how did I get here? Because I'm kind of gearing this all towards a student thing, which I presume most of you are. So you're probably wondering, like, when I'm 50 million years old, how do I, do something with my life? And so this is what I wound up doing. When I was young, in the 70s and 80s, yes, I'm that old, I was really into comic books, and this really set the foundation for pretty much everything I did moving forward. I learned to draw by copying comics. I didn't have any formal art training, but started out with Speed Racer and stuff on TV, Bloom County, the Sunday funnies that used to come in the newspaper. Eventually I went into comic books, and the comic books kind of grew with me. As I got older, I got into more underground stuff. Frank Miller's Sin City on the lower right there. Frank Miller, all of his stuff is black and white, but he does really good spotting with the white. So he draws the eye. It's almost like drawing in reverse, like an etching. And that had a lot of influence on future work. In the 80s, I discovered punk rock, and it completely changed my life. I moved from drawing cartoon characters almost overnight to drawing punk logos, just copying everything I could, the Dead Kennedys logo, the Misfits logo, whatever it was. I think the most profound part of this was that it wasn't just about the music. The music had an art movement along with it that was just as important as the music. So even if you weren't a good skater, even if you weren't in a band, you could find something to do within the punk thing. And that carried me for quite a few years into the 90s. When I moved to the Pacific Northwest, I was following the music scene. I wanted to be where the music was happening. So you've got your Frank Kozik, Soundgarden there, and your Koop Nirvana. I also, while I was here, I discovered that I wanted to be a graphic designer, but I was already in school for a sociology degree. So I started making posters for the bands that were coming through town, but it was all completely self-taught, informal. When I got out of school with my useless sociology degree, I spent about 2 years trying to kind of grassroots a career together. I took crappy jobs at screen printing studios, at digital pre-press houses, anything I could do to kind of get close to the graphic arts. After about 2 or 3 years of that, I finally gave up and went back to school because I just couldn't get the traction I wanted. So I went down to San Francisco and I went to CCA. And that was kind of the final bit in this puzzle. That was where I was introduced to formal design, the idea of a concept, the idea of form and structure. You can see on the right-hand side there, up top, that's a Mondrian, and you've probably all seen this in your art history books. It's a tree, and he takes the tree and he abstracts it until you finally wind up with that thing that looks like a Mondrian that we all know. And when I first saw this, I finally, I crossed the Rubicon, as it was. I never was going to go back to being a lowbrow artist because I finally understood what this kind of stuff was about. Because up until this point, I kind of thought it was all wankery. I'm like, oh, look at your, artsy fartsy stuff. Like, I'm all punk rock and cool. But now I got it. I was like, oh man, that's genius. Like, so I was introduced to a whole new world of design. Down below is Martin Vanetsky. He was doing very prominent work at the time. I don't know if he's still very well known or not. And so moving forward from there, I graduated school. This was the tech boom of the 90s. So you see the TiVo logo there. I worked for a company that all we did was branding and identity for .com companies, none of which still exist. Except TiVo, I think maybe still exists. Probably our best known brand that came out of there. But I also kind of opened up what I was interested in viewing. So I started to look at a lot of modernism, postmodernist stuff, 1920s advertising, 60s psychedelia, like all kinds of stuff. I started pulling it into my personal style. And so the too long didn't read on that is kind of like comic books plus punk rock plus modernism equals Dan Stiles. So that's how I got to where I am now. And with the practice I have today, I view design in two different ways. There's design as art and there's design as a service. And so on the left here, you can see, you walk in any bank and there's going to be a brochure there. This is graphic design as a service. Somebody comes to you and they say, my toilet doesn't flush. I'd like you to make my toilet flush. And you go in there and you work on it like a plumber and you fix it and they give you whatever, $500 and you go home. That's it. That's design as a service. And you can make a lot of money doing that. Brochures, websites, B2B business, whatever. But I'm interested in design as art. I'm interested in design as the creation of culture. And I think that's because of the background that you just saw. Like the dead Kennedys weren't making graphic design to sell, bank accounts. That was part of a larger movement. It was part of a cultural movement. So on the right here, you see the Jim Phillips Screaming Hand, probably the most iconic piece of work to come out of the 80s skateboarding movement. And that's the kind of stuff, someday I hope to die and leave at least one thing that important behind me. I don't think I've made it yet, so I got to get going. But the creation of culture in design, it doesn't need to be just dead Kennedys and stuff like that. You don't need to be working for the hottest rap group or something. You look at all of these things up here, and these have all, in their own way, created culture. And Apple Computer is certainly not, cheaping out. So if you get a job there, you still have a chance. If you created the interface in an iPhone, that's the creation of culture. The Air Jordan 1, creation of culture. MTV, their whole business is the creation of culture. And so that's, I think, what design can be. It doesn't need to be bank brochures. It can be a whole lot more. So process, how do I do this? Everybody always wants to know, like, how do you end up where you end up? And a lot of people don't want to show that because it's really ugly. The process is just grim. I believe, just as Chuck Close does it, inspiration is for amateurs. I think the rest of this quote is something like, the professionals come in and they just get to work. And that's true. You sit down every morning at your desk. I study a lot of writers, actually, because writers are really disciplined. They sit down with a blank piece of paper in the morning and a typewriter or whatever their chosen medium is, and they say, today I need to write 600 words. They don't know what they're going to write. They just start writing. And I think design, we've really been taught that, you got to have a concept. You got to think of this concept first, and then once that's nailed down in your head, you sit down and you execute it. Kind of like this. Here's, the thumbnail sketch of the Sigur Rós poster on the left that I, did with my left hand while I was driving or something. And then, oh yeah, it's done. Cool. Now I can execute it. This has happened to me like maybe 10 times in my life. It's just not how it actually works. The way I do design is design as a process of discovery. You don't have to start with a good idea. You just have to finish with one. So the real point is to get down and start working. You don't need to know what you're doing. You just need to get going. So you look at this, probably one of my better known posters for the Arctic Monkeys. This came out when their single was Why Do You Only Call Me When You're High or something like that. And so I drafted after that single title in order to come up with this idea of this is a woman and she's high as hell and she's calling you on the phone for booty call or whatever she's doing. But if you look at how I got here, this is the process of discovery. You know, number one is my sketch. They're a British band, so I thought, wow, what if we do a British phone box? It's kind of like leaking psychedelia out the windows. That would be really cool. So I started working it, and you see 2, man, that's a boring image. That is a sucky poster. So 3, I'm like, oh, what if it's melting? That's real cool. Nope, still just, there's nothing that grabs you about that. You would walk by down the street and be like, oh, yeah. So I'm like, you know what we need? We need a woman making a phone call inside the call box. So I added her in there. That's a number 4. And then I realized I don't need the call box. The call box is just getting in the way. It was just a vehicle to get me to discover that I needed to do the woman. And so at 5, I could have stopped as sort of a 60s tribute kind of looking poster. But I realized I could take it just a little bit farther, make it a little better. And that's how I wound up at 6. So if you look at 1 and 6, you know, that all probably happened within a period of 20 hours or something like that. And I did not end up anywhere close to where I started. You know, discovery is non-linear. I think we're taught in school that you ideate, you sketch, you comp, you revise, you execute. That is great if you're working in pen and ink, because once you start laying down the ink, you kind of can't back up. You're committed at that point. Every step down the line is another level of commitment to the idea that you've made. But we work on computers, at least I do. So, you know, I can ideate, comp it up, execute it, look at it, go, nope, don't like that, go back to revising it. If the revisions don't work, I can go back to ideation at any point in the process. So it looks like this. This is one of my art boards. You know, I just drag aside what I'm working on. If I like it, I make some changes. If I don't, I abandon it and make another one. There's at least 6 different concepts going on this page, a dozen different, you know, variations on each color. Down in the very lower center, you can see, you know, the final piece. But there was a lot of different stuff going on. You know, I had a pill with a phone in it. I had a phone hanging by balloons. I mean, there was a bunch of different ideas before I wound up where I wanted to go. So it's not so much thinking and execution. It's circular. Think, execute, think, execute. Here's another example, a December's poster I did last year for their New York show. This is the Chrysler Building. This is the process. The first one is a sketch. I usually don't even submit sketches to the clients, but this was the night before I flew out to South by Southwest and I needed to get them something. So I gave them a sketch just to shut them up. But unfortunately, I was now committed to this idea of the Chrysler Building with these, you know, these flowers creeping up it. So I tried 100 different variations. I didn't really like any of them. And towards the end there, the last frame, you can see it starts to come together. And on the very last frame, you can see I added the window. So this is the 11th hour when I added the window with the woman in it, which brings it all together. In my mind, now you've got kind of this Rapunzel tower made out of the Chrysler Building with these flowers creeping up. It suddenly tells a story, which is what the Decemberists are all about. They're all about, at first time I saw them, it was like hearing somebody read Moby Dick out loud to music. It's all this, oh, the story of the woman and the, you know. And the reason this came about was I was actually working on a different thing. Concurrently, I was working on this book cover for Patrick DeWitt, where in this story, he inverts it and there's a man in the tower looking out with a spyglass. But the idea of this window in the tower came from something completely unrelated to the Decemberist poster. But at the 99th second there, I stuck that in there and then, you know, went to print the next day. And that's something you can't do unless you kind of keep your process open and fluid. Where does the process begin? People always ask, like, you're staring at a blank piece of paper, you know, how do you start? I call it the point of entry, and it can be anything, just anything. Grab it and go. Design is like an onion. You know, you've got multiple layers until you get to the very center, which it'd be great if it's like a nougat center, but it's not. It's just more onion. But like, let's pretend that we're trying to get to the center of the onion here, right? So the point of entry is just cutting through that brown, crumbly stuff on the outside. It's not the finished thing. It's just getting you in there so you can start working. Once you're in there, it's still a complete maze and, you know, anarchy, and so you're not finished. But the point of entry is what will get you started. It'll get the juices flowing, so you're not just sitting there staring at a blank piece of paper panicking. You know, this is a process for my Stereolab poster. I would call this just playing. I had this shape. I was playing with this shape. It's kind of like a tangram, which is on the right there, which is a Chinese puzzle where they take a piece of paper or not, just anything, a square, cut it into 7 pieces, and you can make different things out of these little triangles. It's amazing what you can make out of this. You know, Paul Rand loved these things. Spent a lot of time playing with them. So, you know, I messed with this shape. Finally, I put it on this head, this really badly drawn head, as glasses. I'm like, Stereolab has nothing to do with glasses, but it has an awful lot to do with earphones, stereo. So all of that playing gelled at the end into this happy little dude listening to Stereolab. Again, another one I did for Death Cab for Cutie. I was just banging my head against this. I did all these posters. It was like, oh, a ship in a bottle and all this, you know, sort of emo stuff that really wasn't working. And like a week earlier, I'd been sitting up late at my kitchen counter, and we had a stack of magazines with those little subscription cards that, you know, are in them, and they all fall out and are really annoying. So I sat there, I was drinking a glass of wine, and I took a pair of scissors and started cutting out shapes from the subscription cards and just sticking them together. The ones I liked, I glued down in my sketchbook and moved on. My wife saw this one, tore it out of my sketchbook and hung it in a little IKEA frame on the wall to cover up a hole in the plaster. And so like a week later, I'm leaving my studio. I'm totally just defeated by this design, but I saw it. I'm like, God, that kind of looks like lips with a little drop of blood in the corner. And so that was enough to get me going, you know, on the Death Cab poster. It was enough to give me just that little moment. I was sort of inadvertently inspired by myself, just by making. You just got to keep making stuff and you'll get there. Sonic Youth, one of my all-time favorite bands. I must have done 12 posters before I came up with one I liked because I augured in. The more I want to do well, the worse I do. So I had this idea of the bleeding ear. I want to do something with the bleeding ear, and it just wasn't coming together. And I kept drawing more and more stuff until finally, in the lower right there, you can see it kind of gelled. This, you know, Sonic Youth is coming in one side, and the blood's coming out the other, and the guy's brain is getting rattled by the music. This turned out to be probably one of my best known posters. And again, it just, you know, I mean, look at where it started, you know, really pretty far away from where it ended up. My Feist poster, another pretty well-known one. I was, again, kind of augured in on trying to come up with an idea for this, and I wound up, I was on the train coming down from Seattle at like 20 miles an hour, or whatever that train goes, and some woman walked by and she had this great pattern on her skirt. I'm like, what is that made out of? It's like circles inside circles. So I sat there with my laptop and I kind of drew this thing on the left, this sort of a schematic of what that pattern's baseline shapes were. Played with it a little bit, put it away. But then when it came time to do something for Feist, and I had nothing, you know, I started developing this birds out of it, and it wound up, you know, becoming this. Again, not really starting out with a really solid concept, just ending up with something that seemed appropriate. So I'm really concept driven. I have a design degree, not an illustration degree, so everything has, at least by the time you're done, you've got to be able to explain why it looks the way it looks. So as an exercise, I had last year around Christmas, the concert touring scene dies down. After the New Year's shows, nothing happens till spring. So I got this job, and I wanted to give myself a challenge. So there used to be this artist called Prince, maybe you've heard of him. There used to be another artist called Bob Seger, maybe you've heard of him. They are both from the Midwest. When they were starting up, real young, in like the late 70s, early 80s, they were both about equally big. And Prince would tour around Minneapolis, and Bob Seger would come on the radio because he was from Detroit, and he would just think, like, why do people like this man's songs? These songs are just atrocious. Maybe I'm gonna write one and figure out why. So he actually, when Doves Cry, which is one of Prince's best known songs, is a Bob Seger song written by Prince. He was trying to emulate the style to figure out what was going on there. So I gave myself a set of rules. I said, no concept. I'm not going to have a concept. And instead of having a reductive process and making my stuff very lean, I'm going to have an additive process. I can only add things to this image. So I spent about 2 months just adding to this periodically. And I came up with this image where there's no reason that woman is wearing those glasses with the butterfly. There's no reason behind any of this. It was really just an exercise in design, really. I gave myself a set of rules and I followed through. Turned out to be really popular. I don't tend to tell people. There's no reason. You know, I don't know why this thing exists, but I just made it that way. The client loved it, so it worked out. Minimalism versus maximalism. I'm pretty well known as a minimalist. What I try to do with a lot of my stuff is pare it down as far as you possibly can. I spent a lot of years in the Bay Area making logos. And I think if you look at this little miniaturized bird on the right, you can see that a lot of my stuff, if you take it down to 2 colors, is kind of a logo, really. And what I like about the logo is if you can make something work at 1 inch by 1 inch in black and white, it'll work anywhere, anytime. You have got a winner. If it works that big and people are like, oh, that's cool, Like, you can blow it up on the side of a building, you can add colors, you can add texture, you can add whatever you want, because the roots of what you have created are good. So what I try to do oftentimes is take away. I don't add, I take away. So, you know, like this particular design, if I would have had two faces just looking at each other, it would have looked like that old parlor trick where is it a vase or is it two faces? And nobody would have cared. It would not have enticed anybody to look again. But now I have this person looking within themselves, almost like a mask. And, you know, people have, this is my most widely ripped off image. Revolution Street is a book about the Iranian Revolution, the treatment of women in Iran during the revolution. It was not good. And so this is a hand kind of taking this woman like a pawn. And it's just the negative space within the hand. And that's what makes it interesting. If there's a hand and a woman in a burqa, nobody would care. But since it's the space inside the hand that creates the woman with the burqa, people think it's really, really clever. Clients love this. If you can do something clever like this, they fall all over it. Here's the same kind of thing. Zombies versus Cheerleaders. This is a comic book cover. The only reason this comic exists is to show scantily clad women smashing zombies. I probably wouldn't have done it, except I really want to do a comic book cover, so I did it anyway. So, you know, the negative space, it really is two hands, two guns, you know, some lips, a ponytail, and some type. The woman doesn't actually exist. She's created by the negative space. Another thing that I think is really important and something that you can really only learn in school, unless you're very studious on your own, is typography. Most typography is really bad, and it's just getting worse because the computer enables bad type. It's very easy to make like, meh, that's all right, that'll work. Here's an example of that. This is a Mondo poster that they put out for a Superman movie, as you can tell, because of Superman. But what movie is it? I don't really know. And that's because the type is behind his leg, and it's Helvetica regular that has been skewed. It's not even oblique, it's skewed Helvetica regular that's been stroked and hidden. It's about 18 point, maybe 12 point behind his leg. This is what happens when you hire somebody who's a really good illustrator and a really bad typographer, because what they want to do is they want to make a pretty image, and you're like, oh crap, I need to put these ugly letters on here somewhere. Where can I hide it? And so they look for this little innocuous piece of negative space, and they jam their type in there. And you know, that is the epitome of bad type. Good type. I know what this woman is advertising, because the entire poster is set up with her looking at the name of the product. The P. Volo thing is a Cassandra. Everybody probably knows Cassandra. Technically not good type. I mean, it's an ugly typeface, but the weird wonky typeface matches the weird wonky bird, and suddenly you have this thing of beauty, because he's not hiding the type, he's integrating the type into the entire design. And this notion of integrated typography is something that I really try to do with my work when I can, is, you know, I did this Tame Impala poster and I drew all the type in the same shapes that I used to make the poster, guided by voices. Everything on this poster takes you to the type. The point of this poster is to read the type, because it's about the band, not about my drawing. Black keys, you know, this was one of the ones I did actually stick the type in the corner on this one. And I was like, that is a complete cop-out. Where can I put it? And so I put it right in the middle as a big old earring. So yeah, it's a big image, and you see the woman, you see the skull, but you know, the type is definitely not hidden. It's smack dab in the middle of the poster. Alt J. On this one, I put a gloss coat over the glasses and her lips, so they're shiny and kind of reflective, and you can see the words Alt J reflecting in the lenses of her glasses. Oftentimes I get these music festivals that have 10,000 different bands. And what do you do when you have a lot of bands? Most people put a brick underneath their image. They're like, I'm gonna make a pretty image, and then I'm gonna put a brick of type underneath. And I really hate doing that. I've been forced to do it before, but I always try to figure out a way that I can work around that. So in this particular instance, I was like, well, you know, I can make this bear, because we do a bear every year for their festival. And I can put all the type on the guitar case like stickers. So, you know, you can fit 30 band names on there, and it's still integrated into the entire image, as opposed to being this little thing that you wish didn't exist at the bottom. M83, this is really taken it a little too far, but since it's sold, this is a merchandise poster only sold at the show. You know you're at an M83 show, because you kind of can't read this. This is inspired by 1960s illegible concert poster typography. I had a lot of fun with it, yeah, it doesn't say M83 anywhere on there except for that sort of convoluted craziness. So, since this is a student thing, I thought I would try to put together some words of advice. Give a shit. That is my biggest piece of advice I can give you. And since you guys are all here, my guess is you probably already give a shit. The people who are back in their dorm room right now doing bong hits, they don't give a shit. And I'm not kidding, like giving a shit is gonna carry you really, really far, because it's that internal drive, that internal motivation, that will to eat ramen, that will to do whatever it's gonna take to push through to what it is you're trying to achieve, whether it's in a singular design or it's your entire career. The hardest design project you are ever gonna take on is the design of your own career, because it's in your hands, unless you are comfortable just sitting at a desk at a firm, which is fine. But if you want to get out there and sort of do something on your own, you're in charge of making all that happen, and you need to will that into existence by giving a really big shit. So I mean, this is like, oh, I give no shits. So like, I'm real cool, right? No, that is who you are when you give no shits. You are basically asking the world to do for you. You aren't going to do for yourself or for them. You're going to try to do as little as possible just to kind of collect that paycheck. And our system in this country is kind of set up that way. You go to grade school and you're like, oh, you know, I'm gonna dodge whatever I can dodge here. You go to high school, like, how many classes can I cut and still get a decent grade? You go to college, a lot of people are like, yeah, you know, B's and C's are all right, right? You get in the world and that inverts. Like, you can't play that way or you're gonna get crushed. You need to give so much of the shit that you will things into existence. You know, like this dumb little sketch of the kitty, I just wanted that to exist. There was no client, there was no reason for this to happen, but I was like, this would be funny. It's a little prosperity kitty, but he's, you know, he's giving the horns. That has actually grown into this massive, crazy product line for me that I, you know, just t-shirts and bags, and I mean, I sell a lot of little, you know, devil kitties. People love this thing, and that was purely because I made that out of thin air. And anybody in this room can do that as well. That's what we do. We make things up. It's crazy. We get paid to make things up. This is a poster I did for Wilco. This was the comp I sent them. They're like, great, print it. I was not satisfied. You know, the print, I had to get it to the printer in the morning, but it was 7 o'clock at night, so I stayed up all night and I cleaned it up and I made it something I could be proud of. That's giving a shit, because the client was signed off. They were good. It was all on me to decide everything I put out in the world needs to be as good as I can possibly make it. You know, I can sleep later. I willed an entire store into an existence. You know, this store was down, this is the Portland pop-up that I did this year with my wife. This is just sheer force of will that this happened. You know, in 6 weeks we made a store, we sold a bunch of stuff, and the store is now gone. Nobody handed that to us. We made it up. Another question is, I think everybody knows what they want. You know, they want to be rich, they want to be famous. But the issue is that nobody has like 5 hours in their day where they're like in suspended animation, where they're like, you know, that 5 hours, I can learn French during that time or something. Like, we go home at night, we crash on the couch, we're exhausted, full days, everybody lives that way. But the question is, if your day is so full and you want to achieve something, something's got to cut. You know, you can't keep doing the things you're doing. You're gonna have to give up something. I'm not going to the gym anymore, or I'm not, whatever it is. That suspended animation thing actually kind of does happen, in that the average American spends 5 hours a day watching TV and 3 hours on their phone. That's an 8-hour day that you could be learning French or doing whatever it is you want to do. So, you know, if you really want to, if you want to have like a rad body with ripped abs or something, you got to go to the gym every day and you got to eat right, and something's going to get cut from your life for that to happen. So if you want a really awesome design career, you know, you might have to cut the Xbox. Sorry, you know, it's kind of a waste of time. Here's another thing. Don't ask what can you do for me, instead ask what can I do for you. I would go everywhere you go, especially classes at school, and treat it like a job interview. If you're the one who shows up, you're supposed to have 2 sketches on Tuesday, you show up with 3 sketches and some comps, the teacher's going to notice. You know, what you are doing is you are out there, no matter what you do and where you go. I have kids, right? And my kids are they're just lazy little fuckers, right? You know, they're just sitting there like, when's dinner? You know, and hey, you know, I'm watching my iPad, and it's like, no, and if you're hungry, like, go get some food. And you can grow up with this attitude, and you can kind of keep that attitude until you're 25 years old, because all your teachers are here to help you. I'm here today to help you. Even the ones that you hate and are really mean, they're doing that to help you. Your parents are helping you. Everybody's saying, what can I do for you? You're going to walk into somebody's office once you come out of here with your piece of paper, and you're going to sit down, and they're going to say, what can you do for me? And if you can't do anything for them, no job, sorry, and you're out on the street. And so, you know, you got to get into that habit of walking that office and saying, I can do these things, you know, I can do this, this, and this, and this, and I can be awesome, because the entire capitalist system is set up that That person just wants to hire you and exploit your labor and make a penny off it. And so if you have nothing they can exploit, you know, sorry. This is something that I've found in my career that has really led the entire thing down the path it's gone, which is that one thing leads to another. I named my book One Thing Leads to Another, because you never know what's going to happen with work you put out there, which is why you need to give a shit about it. On the left, we have a CD cover I got paid maybe $500 to do. It wound up getting featured on the Grain Edit blog. AT&T called me to do an ad campaign built around that image that paid me about $10,000. So that $500 little throwaway job that I could have phoned in wound up turning into a really big national ad campaign and a big payday for me. On the left, an AC Newman poster. On the right, a fabric line. I was called by Birch Fabrics. They liked the submarine. They said, can you do us a submarine print? So I did the submarine print. They liked the submarine print so much, they're like, can you flesh this out to a full line of fabric? Did 7 different fabrics in this one line. They liked that so much, I've since done 5 different fabric lines for them, all based on the connection that came through this one print for a pretty not well-known artist. So Q&A, I'm gonna start out. How did you get into this? Because everybody always asks that one. I started doing posters in college. As you saw from my background, I've been drawing since I was 4. But the first time I got paid to do it was in college. Some guy saw a graffiti I was doing and was like, hey, you want to do posters? And I was like, maybe. He's like, oh, we'll give you $20 and all the beer you can drink at the show. And I was like, cool, sign me up. And so I got into doing rock posters that way, and I was immediately hooked. It was awesome. Like, I get paid to draw. It had never occurred to me that drawing was a skill. It was always something I just did. I thought I would go and get some job somewhere else doing something else. I didn't think it was a worthwhile thing that other people couldn't do and they would pay me to do. So that was a real eye-opener, and it's brought me to where I am today. Who hires you to do posters? Another really big question that I always get. On the left is one of the first color posters I ever did, I think 1994. Buckhorn, my roommate, was the girlfriend of the drummer. But normally back then I got hired by promoters because their job was to promote the show, because without the internet, your job was to hang up a lot of posters to get people to come in. That's how shows were advertised. Now on the right, that's a Slater-Kinney poster I just finished a few months ago. Can't read the date on it. Very recently anyway. They call me directly now. So I've built over the last 20 years enough of a repertoire and enough of a body of work that the bands now come to me, and I don't really work with the middlemen anymore, but that is how I got started. What do you actually do for money? Because posters only make up, it's what everybody knows me for, but it only makes up about 30% of my income. I do a lot of things for money. In the upper left, I did a whole suite of stuff for the X Games. That Raise Your Pinkies thing that the Red Robin was doing, that was me. Those Red Robin ads, that thing with Tokyo, that's a campaign I did for Old Navy. IBM, the little dumpling there, they hired me to do a bunch of stuff around Watson, their supercomputer can cook apparently. And so we did a whole bunch of stuff around that. Ford hired me for 2 weeks just to draw backgrounds behind their cars. They didn't give me any direction whatsoever. They said, here are some photos of cars, draw some cool backgrounds behind them. And these are out right now. So if you see, I've seen a couple on Facebook and whatnot where, I'm like, oh, look. That hand thing is a whole suite of icons I did for Intel. Below that, I've done a number of children's books, written and illustrated children's books, motion graphics for Nick Jr., the IBM, the face with the glasses there I did another project for IBM, and we decided we would do a poster and then we would actually draw the poster on a model's face. So that's a model with my art drawn on her. I do a lot of book covers. Mr. Kafka there is a book jacket. All of this came from one book cover I did for the Sisters Brothers, probably the first book I ever really did, but it was so incredibly well received that I immediately had a career in book jacket design based on the strength of that one cover. And wow, that's it. We made it through. I thought I'd be here forever. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? That was like 80 slides. I think you were first.
I was struck by something that you just said at the end. You're seeing an early poster and a newer one. In the earlier one, there you could see a lot of the text and the date information about the show is very prominent. And the later stuff and a lot of the more well-known stuff is much more minimalist with the actual information. Is that new with the rise of the internet, or is that just a change in the
Yes.
topic, or what?
The reason the posters look the way they do now, and the reason we can do really crazy stuff with the type and stick it inside a woman's earring and stuff, is that the posters no longer used as advertising; they're used as merchandise. So I get hired by the band to do a poster. They print 100. They sell them the night of the show at the merch table, alongside the CDs and T-shirts. So people never see the poster before the night of the show, as opposed to 10, 20 years ago, the poster was what brought you to the show because you saw it on the street. So it was a viable form of advertising on the street. You had to put really big type on it. You had to make sure the date and all of that was really legible. Very standard graphic design rules. Now they've become much more of an art form, and so you can twist those rules so you don't have to do the giant, the Decemberist at the bottom or whatever. Something over here?
Yeah. Do you do a lot of hand illustration, or do you do that more as just like sketching and then to the computer? Or
I do a lot of really bad sketching. I used to do everything by hand, absolutely everything. I hated the computer. I thought the computer was like Satan's work. And once I started working in pre-press and a couple of other positions, I realized the power of the computer. It could replace like 12 different skilled people that you would need to take something from a sketch to being a final product. And so I started using it as a publishing tool. And then eventually I got hooked in Illustrator, and it all kind of went downhill after that. But once I got really fluid in Illustrator with a Wacom tablet, it's not like hand drawing. It's a different tool, but it's similar. It's kind of like drawing. And so yeah, I sketched a lot of stuff. I work on my sketchbook to work out ideas, but I almost never create final product by hand anymore, which is kind of sad. And maybe when I'm old and retired, I can get back to make, because I do miss it. I really do miss making stuff by hand, but it takes like 9 times as long.
Okay, thank you.
That's it?
Another question? Does anyone have another question?
Oh, come on. Yeah.
When you did the motion graphics, did you just teach yourself that, or did you like have some?
Yeah, lynda.com.
Were you just like,
honestly,
I do this maybe? So.
It's motion Photoshop.
Okay.
So I'm like, I already know Photoshop really, really well. So now I knew Flash. I taught myself Flash years ago when that was a real thing. And so I'm like, okay, I know frame by frame, and I know this sort of tweening thing that they do. So I learned that. I also do a lot of just storyboard and character design for animation that gets passed off to somebody who is a full-time motion graphics person. But yeah, the motion stuff is something, if you just kind of be like, well, I guess I'm going to bed an hour later tonight and I'm just going to read this tutorial, you can work it out especially if you already know all the Adobe software. Yeah.
Do you have a second bachelor's or a master's?
I have a bachelor's in sociology, and I have like 3/4 of a bachelor's in graphic design. I got hired right out of the classroom by one of my professors, and I went to CCA in San Francisco, and it was so ungodly expensive that when he sort of put the offer in front of me, I was like, oh yeah, you got me. And I walked like that day. I'm like, bye-bye. And I never looked back, because I feel like you should have a bachelor's degree to be like, yeah, I'm an educated person. But once you get into graphic design, like nobody's ever asked me for it. Like this is probably bad to tell you because you're all, finish your degrees, get at least 1 degree. But the graphic design is about a skill set, and for me, once I went to school and I went through 3 years of school and I learned all these fundamental skills, and I came in already knowing the computer because of the jobs I had before I went back to school, and a lot of what they were teaching was just like, this is how you use Illustrator, and I'm like, I got that. So yeah, the cash offer, just changed my mind on school overnight. But stay in school.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Do you think that your major in sociology helped you with graphic design?
Yes. It's unfortunate because back before even I was young, like let's say the 60s and 70s, getting a design or getting a degree was like this thing. You got your degree and then you were now an employable person. Now getting a degree is like, I'm an educated person, I'm a well-read person, I've thought deep thoughts, I've read Hemingway. I understand at least the basics of physics and whatever else they teach you. But over here, those are job skills. And getting this degree where you're reading Hemingway has nothing to do with job skills. So it gets back to you walking to the guy's office and he's like, what can you do for me? I know Hemingway. It's not going to cut it, but you're like, hey, I can kick ass, and in design, you're hired. So it made me a better person. It made me understand, because my job is to come with ideas, and so knowing the world and understanding the world the way a college degree can teach you is really good, because you can't do graphic design as a dumb person. Really, I mean, it's a language. It's a language. So you need to be able to speak intelligently through this language. So it was invaluable in that way, but it's not a job skill. So I needed to then go back to school to get the job skill, so I could kind of mush the two together. So I think I don't ever regret getting that degree, but it was not. You know, I feel really bad for people who go to Harvard and get like $100,000 English degree, because, you know, they're going back to grad school afterwards for sure. Yeah.
When you were talking about how you like study writers, like, and how they're disciplined, and you were kind of talking about how they like make themselves write, you know, X amount of words a day or whatever. Do you have a personal project that you kind of like work on every day, or have some?
I have this thing I've just started recently, and I can't even tell if it's working or not yet. I call it the graphic design workout. And I don't know if you've ever like trained at a gym for something, a marathon or whatever, but you have a thing you need to do. You're like, on Monday I run 6 miles, and then I run 9 miles, and then I run 12, and you know, or I do push-ups and sit-ups on this day and this day I do. And if you stick to that program long enough, you see results. Most people don't stick to it long enough, so they don't get any physical results. I'm trying to do that more recently with graphic design, and so I have this punch list of things that I need to do every day, like come up with one funny little sketch, come up with one color piece per week that's just self-motivated, you know, learn motion, like work on your motion graphics, back to the earlier question, you know, go on Lynda and do an hour tutorial. And so I actually have this program that I've written for myself, and I'll come back in a year and tell you if it worked or not, because I do think that you need to do that kind of thing. Otherwise, it's very easy just to get submerged in the day-to-day work. Did I answer the question? I totally like went off base.
Yeah, I was just looking for ideas for myself, like, because I never know where to start.
Yeah, I mean, I would just pick something and then be disciplined about following it. And I mean, like anything else, it's all just a skill set that you learn through repetition. So if there's something you want to learn, like, I'm really bad at drawing hands, you know, just force yourself to draw one hand every day, and by the end of a month, you're going to be you may not be, you know, Michelangelo, but your hands are going to look a whole lot better.
Thank you so much, Dan.
Thanks. Sorry I was late.
And next week we have Eric and Dana from Sunset City, and Eric is actually hanging out in the back, so you'll see him again next Thursday. Thank you again, Dan. That was really wonderful. So good.